I am not over the NFL playoffs. An amazing, amazing weekend. And again, the Buffalo Bills fall to the Kansas City Chiefs. And I don't think there's any other way to spin this other than the Bills choked. Not necessarily Josh Allen, but the Buffalo Bills choked, whether it's the kicker, whether it's missing tackles, whether it is simply Stephon Diggs, who bitches and moans about everything that doesn't go his way, letting a ball go right through his hands on one of the most epic throws I think I've ever seen from a quarterback. The Buffalo Bills choked. Is it Josh Allen's fault? No. Is it Josh Allen's fault, though? Yeah, it is. He's supposedly this elite quarterback who's hyped up as one of the best in the business. And I got news for you. He's not. And I know the conversation is happening about Josh Allen, that somehow, some way, Josh Allen is just a victim of his generation. Tell that to guys like, I don't know, Karl Malone and John Stockton, who never got by the Chicago Bulls. Tell that to Patrick Ewing. Tell that to Reggie Miller. You are not a victim of your generation. You are a victim of not being better than guys like Patrick Mahomes. And whether it is Josh Allen, whether it is Reggie Miller, you are only as good as the people that you beat. And Jake, right now, Josh Allen hasn't been good enough, and he's not better than Patrick Mahomes.
Absolutely correct. And I think that Patty is, once again shown us his quality. And I think that, this was the year that everyone said, oh, no Tyreek Hill this year. This team's going to have a down year. This is not their year. This is the year where, maybe the Bills get over the hump, or maybe, the Chiefs don't get to the AFC Championship game, or yada, 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 all the noise that we all heard. And Patrick Mahomes just went out and once again proved why he's the guy in the AFC right now. And obviously, Baltimore's got something to say about that. Obviously, we're going to get a great matchup there. But for now, I think Patrick Mahomes has shown you everything you need to see. And I think the hard part for Buffalo is that, Josh Allen, it's not like he played like crap in this game. It's not like he just was awful Josh Allen and turned it over 10 times. But ultimately, here we are again. Another season passes by, and we're sitting here talking about how Josh Allen and the Bills are not able to get over the hump. And I'll say what I always say when it comes to kickers missing, game tying, game winner, basically just clutch kicks that you need them to make. If you need your kicker to make a kick to win a ball game, you didn't do enough during the game. And that's the reality of it. Justin Tucker level kickers don't fall off trees in this league, right? So I'm not going to sit here and be like, Tyler Bass is really some awful kicker. You missed a big kick. No. Every kicker misses them. But the reality is you wouldn't be in that position if, like you said, if Diggs makes a catch, or if you make one more play in the middle of the game.
That's the scapegoat, in my opinion. I don't know how Diggs didn't catch that ball. That is one of the most majestic throws I think I have ever seen. As somebody that's covered the NFL for 30 years, I don't remember a quarterback just launching a football like that and dropping an absolute dime, and the wide receiver just simply did not catch it. And Diggs, I think, this is a guy who's perpetually unhappy. This is a guy who whines and complains. His brother's talking about how they're not using him right, and he's got to get out of Buffalo. And, well, that's great, but the ball hit him in the hands. And if he catches that ball, it's a different game. But here's the other thing that you can't get away from. You look at the numbers in this game, they're dead even. You simply got beat by Patrick Mahomes. And the oddity might be that the Chiefs have struggled with drop passes this year. And then Buffalo got beat by Kansas City on a drop pass. And you had every mark in this game. Like, you think about that Nicole Hardeman fumble through the end zone. That absolutely should have been a death knell for Kansas City as they're marching down to end that game. It wasn't. Yet you cannot finish. And the other thing that I think so many people want to say is that, hey, well, if Kansas City makes that field goal, or if Buffalo makes that field goal, they win the game. Au contraire, you had, a minute 40 left on the clock that you were ready to hand to Patrick Mahomes. And I wouldn't be so quick to say that Patrick Mahomes wouldn't have come down and won the game for Kansas City, because he had dominated Kansas City all game long. Like, he had his way with the Chiefs. And I think one of the scary things now is, if you're the Baltimore Ravens, Travis Kelce apparently has decided he wants to play football again, because he was really, really good in that game last night. He blocked effectively. His routes were really good. My only question is how much depth does this Kansas City Chiefs team have at the skill positions? Because I look at some of the numbers out of this game, and Valdez-Scantling is turning into this big play wide receiver, but your only guy in volume was Travis Kelce, who was targeted 6 times and made 5 catches for 75 yards and 2 touchdowns. My biggest concern for Kansas City is, do they have depth at the skill positions outside?
Yeah, I mean, clearly, they've got enough to get the job done right now. But you're one injury away from, hey, we're really short, right? Like, as an example, if Rice goes down, that's one of your biggest playmakers right now that you're just taking away another option. And so, yeah, I mean, do they have depth? No, not really, right? I mean, you have options. You've got targets that start for you, but it's not like you got another guy that's just going to hop up off the bench and start making plays. And that's the proposition this year for Kansas City. And I feel like it's a proposition they've been running out there for the last 2 seasons, right? Like, hey, we're going to lean on Travis and we're going to try and develop guys. And, obviously through the middle of the season, Kadarius Toney had many, many drops, and he was kind of the guy that everyone was beating on. And then Rashee Rice just shows up and starts making plays. So, I look at it and I say, yeah, this team's really good. And Patrick Mahomes is making up for some of those, pitfalls in the wide receiver room. But the reality is this Buffalo team has the talent on the roster. They don't have the goods to win the games they need to win, because the other thing I think about is, hey, your defense made plays for you, but they couldn't make plays when you needed it most. And that's the hard part, is like, yeah, you did cause that fumble, that went through the end zone. And that was a huge turning point in the game. Like, you look around and you're like, yeah, you made some nice tackles, but you also allowed Pacheco to gash you a couple of times. You allowed big plays to happen. And so I don't know. A lot of people today are saying, hey, it's time to move on from Sean McDermott. It's time to,
I agree 100%.
New voice in here.
100%. I agree with that.
Yeah. And that's cool. Right. Like, I don't disagree. I mean, you've got a track record here losing in the playoffs. I mean, this is, I think it's 5 years in a row now. You've lost at different stages of the playoffs. So, it's not like it's any secret that this team hasn't won enough. And everyone wants to point to Josh Allen's cap hit and the $47 million. And I'm just sitting here saying, okay, they'll restructure his cap. That will get taken care of. But the reality of the situation is, you can replace Sean McDermott, but whoever that is has to come in here and find a way to get these guys to the next level. And I don't really know what that is when Josh Allen's making that kind of throw and you just simply drop it. I don't know what it is when you put yourself in a position to end the game by getting that turnover at the goal line, and you should take it right down the field like you had been, and you just can't do it in the moment. So that's the issue. This isn't like, hey, Joe Flacco's a 40-year-old quarterback and we just reached the ceiling on him and that's why we lost. That's not what this is, man. It's a whole different thing.
Yeah, I think I look at Sean McDermott and I see a guy that I don't feel like this team plays team football. I think you have a lot of dudes that are out there playing on their own, and Diggs is a good example of that. And the thing that really scares me if I'm a Buffalo fan is the regression of Josh Allen through the middle part of this season. And you see that he has the ability. He doesn't have the leadership and direction. And you can fire the offensive coordinator and do all of that. But there are guys, and the guy is Bill Belichick. Rex Ryan on Get Up this morning was talking about it, and I agree 100%. How do you not try to hire Bill Belichick to lead this franchise? He's the perfect guy. I think if it were Sean McDermott or Jim Harbaugh, I think it's probably a toss-up. I think I would probably want Jim Harbaugh because I'm a big believer that when you have a stud quarterback, you got to have somebody that can make him even more of a stud, right? And I think when you have a guy like Sean McDermott, you know who he is. You know that he's not going to get the job done. Like, how much, and this is a question, I think if you're Buffalo or any other team, like I wonder how much more are you leaving on the bone here? How much meat are you leaving on the bone every year? I think it's a lot.
Yeah.
I think it's a lot. And, I look at the NFC and I look at the path Detroit's taken. Detroit hasn't played a fearsome schedule. Detroit, I look at the way that they've gone through this whole thing, and I say to myself, man, Detroit's had a pretty easy road with the Rams in Tampa, right? Well, now you got to go to San Francisco. Is Detroit battle tested? Can they go to San Francisco and win? I think that's a huge question mark. Is Kansas City battle tested? Can they go to Baltimore and win? Damn right they can, right? You're not questioning Andy Reid. You're not questioning the quarterback. You're not questioning the fact that they made really, really good adjustments on that offensive line to protect Patrick Mahomes and get him in the better spots. And the defense 4-0 blitzes in the fourth quarter that absolutely changed the momentum for Kansas City's defense against Josh Allen. Those throws down the middle of the field on that last drive, those are out of 0 blitzes where they're pushing offensive linemen back into Josh Allen. Those are good adjustments. I look at like San Francisco is a very good example. Is San Francisco Super Bowl good? Man, I don't know that we can say that.
It's tough to say.
Right? Like I watched a really rusty team that offensively, when Debo went out, you didn't know how they were going to score, right? There were some scary moments there when you're trying to figure out, hey, how are they going to score? I know how Kansas City is going to score. They're going to go to Travis Kelce. I know that when I look at Detroit, I know what they have to do offensively to win games. Jared Goff has to spread the football around to 3 different receivers, and they've got to hit big runs. I think we all know that's their blueprint. I have no idea what San Francisco was trying to do to win that game. Number one, I'm curious, how are you falling all over the place on your own field? And we've talked about this ad nauseum on this show. At Levi Stadium, that is one of the worst playing surfaces in the National Football League year in and year out. And you've got DBs and wide receivers slipping and falling, not from Green Bay, but from San Francisco. And I look at a lot of the decision-making on that team, and I think Kyle Shanahan's a hell of an offensive coordinator. Why is CMC not getting the football more in critical situations?
I have no idea.
Like I'm
your best player.
We're watching this game unfold, and you're watching Brock Purdy look really, really nervous. For the first time, Brock Purdy looked like a guy who didn't know what to do with the football. You know what you do with the football when you don't know what to do with the football? You give it to your best player. And I just didn't understand a lot of that. But then I look at Detroit and I say to myself, this is a team that thrives on turf. This is a team that thrives inside. And now you're going to have to go to San Francisco and you're going to have to play a team that's going to make a flip load of adjustments out of that Green Bay game because they were rusty. And I don't care if Debo plays or not. I think San Francisco's twice as good as Detroit is. It's just a matter of making those adjustments and putting on cleats where you're not going to fall down all over the field at Levi's.
Yeah, I mean, I absolutely left the game with the same feeling. It's definitely one of those things where it's like, hey, this was the game where if the 49ers were going to get got, they would have got.
Yes.
But they didn't. They survived. They won the game. And now the beast is back alive. And I would expect that thing to be running smoothly. That's what I would expect. And, as far as Debo's concerned, he's obviously a critical component to what they do. And again, it's the whole system, Shanahan's system, and Brock's a system guy, and the system. We hear about the system constantly. But this is truly one of those things where it's like that particular system relies on everybody working together to accomplish one thing on each individual play. And so when you lose a guy with the athletic ability and the skill of Debo Samuel, that totally changes everything, which is why you see a huge drop off. So the question again really is next week or this coming week, can Brock Purdy confidently fill that void if Debo's not available? Can Brock Purdy be the guy that's like, okay, we know this is different. We've had the whole week to prepare. Can I get the job done? And I'm inclined to say yes, but it remains to be seen.
Well, I think one of the other questions and one of the things that really worries me about the Lions is it's a little surprising that Baker Mayfield, and he threw a horrendous interception in the game, right? But how does he get 300 yards And how are you constantly getting beat deep by Mike Evans? Like, and I love Mike, and I think there's a real good chance that Mike ends up with the Bears, which would be phenomenal. But you cannot tell me that you're going to let Mike Evans average 18 yards a catch with Baker Mayfield throwing him the ball. And Bake's a gamer, and I woke up feeling dangerous this morning. Like, I get the brand, and I get who he is.
When I woke up this morning, I was feeling pretty dangerous.
And the guy's a baller. How did he get 300 yards on you, and how did the one guy who can beat you rep in and rep out beat you rep in and rep out if you're Detroit?
And I felt like, Mike wasn't even really beating him early. He like got better as the game went on, which is even more shocking. Like, that Baker's going to go to him. I mean, again, it's like Brock Purdy and CMC, right? You would expect them to throw the ball to CMC just the same way you would expect Baker to go to Mike Evans. And again, it's one of these things where it's like, okay, yeah, you guys covered Mike pretty good early on. Like, he didn't really have that huge game breaker of a play. He had some crossing routes and made some nice catches, but no backbreakers or anything. And then you get into the third and you warm it up into the fourth, and all of a sudden Mike Evans starts showing up. And that's the thing that I think is really interesting in this in this matchup, because it's a big question when you look at it from that standpoint. Hey, you guys let Mike Evans get going.
They are the Detroit Lions are second to last in the NFL in yards per pass, at 8 yards per pass. And I think that's absolutely terrifying and Debo, I think Debo's, even if he plays, when you have a shoulder injury and you're going up against a physical front seven like Detroit, I think you're going to struggle to make an impact.
Mm-hmm.
Here's the difference, though. You look at San Francisco's offense, and there's diversity in it. And I think Brandon Ayuk clearly is going to have to be the guy that steps up. I think it's going to be huge. Juwan Jennings is going to have to step up, and I think he will. But you look at Brandon Ayuk, he's got to get more than 6 targets. Like, him and Kittle both have to have 8 to 10 targets. And I think that's going to be a key to their success. The thing that really, again, the things that worry you, and Detroit's this great story, but the things that worry you are the little details, especially on the back end of that defense on grass. The grass, especially that grass in Santa Clara, it's the great equalizer. And this San Francisco offense is built to thrive on that turf. And it is quite concerning. And the other thing that I think is also quite concerning is you look at the way that Tampa was able to, without a number 1 running back in the game, average 6 yards a carry. 6 yards a carry with Rachaad White being your number 1 rushing option.
Yeah, and a lot of that was inside too.
They averaged 6 yards a carry against Detroit's front. That's going to be a really interesting game, and as the week goes on, certainly we'll get into it. But I think the Super Bowl is in Baltimore on Sunday. When we start looking at who are the best teams in this league and what we should look at, dudes, I'm telling you now that Kansas City-Baltimore game, and I can only sit up here week after week after week and just absolutely fillet the quality of that Baltimore defense. What did I warn you about with that Baltimore defense?
Yeah,
they run Queen. Patrick Queen, Roquan Smith, Mayer, and we smartly escaped the Chicago Bears. Those two bros running downhill and just daring you to get after the ass. Well, and I think this is the first time all season that we saw CJ Stroud look absolutely average.
Yeah, they were better than him. There's no question about it. I mean, the Ravens defense was as advertised. They showed up, and Stroud met his match. There's no question about it. As far as I'm concerned, CJ Stroud, hell of a rookie season. Everything that you could ask for out of a rookie. If I'm D'Amico, my message to CJ is, hey, chin up, shoulders high, like hell of a season. We'll run it back next year. But the thing that I saw in that Raven game that I think, like, we kind of knew, but I think they took it to another level with that defense was, hey, even when our offense struggles even a little bit early in the game, like even when the Texans got some stops and gave CJ a chance, what did the defense go out and do? And this is what worries you if you're, the 49ers looking at a potential Super Bowl matchup, in my opinion. Let's say it is the Ravens. Dude, if you're going up against that team and going up against that defense, you better understand that they do hit the whole game. Like, that's one thing that I think is kind of underrated. That Ravens defense is looking for a body the whole game. And there's a lot of defenses in the league that are, they take some plays off, or maybe they don't go as hard as they can. They just do what they need to do. And that's not what I saw out of that Ravens defense. And I really feel like when they're playing like that, it rolls this sort of extra layer of momentum into Lamar. Because I think about plays where, it's that fourth down play where, they run Lamar out to the left and he easily, that quarterback rollout easily gets that first down. Like, he wouldn't even had that opportunity if his defense hadn't been playing that way. So that's why I say, like, it's hard to stop Lamar in the fourth down situation late in the game. You're having trouble beating that defense. And so the only question really is, what is that defense going to do about guys like Travis Kelce? What are you going to do against, Rice? Like, how are you going to slow them down? Because if they figure out how to slow Kansas City's offense down, I'm telling you that game is pretty much over, because I don't think that the Kansas City defense is going to keep up with Lamar the whole game the way they did this week. I just don't see that happening.
Yeah, I think one of the things that really worries you so much is that you have a guy that in Lamar Jackson did not throw the football well, did not throw the football in volume. And you start going back to, is Lamar Jackson going to regress to the mean? Is Lamar Jackson going to be that elite pocket passer that we saw develop this entire season into an absolute dominant force? Or does he become more of that scramble, run around guy and throw some dead ducks up into the air guy? Because it's a little concerning that, it's probably because they were up so big and they were never in danger of losing this game. Right. And maybe that's what it was. But you looked at some of those throws and you were like, that didn't look pretty. That didn't look good. Right. And he's running around, and I get it. You dominate. 229 yards rushing was absolutely dominant. And him to have 100 yards rushing and 2 touchdowns, absolutely dominant. But now this is a Chiefs defense that likes hurting bros. And I'm telling you, I love D'Amico, but he's a couple of guys short on that Houston defense.
Definitely.
And I'm very curious to see how all this plays out. And obviously, I'm going to favor Baltimore. Obviously, I'm going to favor Baltimore. They're at home, dominant defense. I think we learned something about Steve Spagnuolo and that Chiefs defense. I think we saw adjustments, not at halftime. I think we saw an adjustment where they held shit back for the fourth quarter and absolutely changed the way that they were blitzing. Those 0 blitzes that were coming through the B gap, I mean, just you had no answer for that in Buffalo.
They tricked CJ. Like, let's not even, like, I'm happy to say it. Like, he was confused at certain points in this game where whether it was that they held some of those plays back, or they showed pressure one way, they brought more, or they would show pressure off the slot, and then they would bring a stunt through the middle. Like, there was a lot of, hey, this cat can play, but he's still a rookie, and there are still things he hasn't seen. And they saved it for the fourth, 100%. So my question is, when you're playing Patrick Mahomes, how do you treat it? Because I think when you pressure Patrick Mahomes, you get a much better result as a defense. I would expect a lot of that.
I agree. You got to get him out of the play. And I would make him run to his right, dude. Like, Patrick Mahomes, he's just really good. All these quarterbacks, Brock Purdy, and this is why, like, when we're talking about Brock Purdy and we're talking about, the matchup with Detroit, Jared Goff is probably the least of the quarterbacks in the playoffs that are left, but it's the NFC Championship game, and he played really well. I look at Brock Purdy versus Jared Goff. I think Brock Purdy's probably even with Goff, and I don't understand the the slander, if you will, or the questions surrounding Brock Purdy. He played well enough to win the game. That dude needs to play every Sunday for like 20 straight weeks. He was clearly rusty. They were rusty. The defense was out of position.
Mm-hmm.
I am not judging Brock Purdy on this one game against Green Bay. Now, hey, Green Bay took him to the wire, and Jordan Love absolutely fell flat on his face in huge moments. And
what did we tell you?
It
What
was
did we tell you
that
was gonna
throw.
happen, dude?
It was that throw we warned y'all about. When you're going right and you try to throw it back over the middle, dude, you're dead in the water.
But I think to that point, that's what the Ravens should try to do to Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah.
Put him in a box, force him to roll right and work with half the field. Because if you can do that, that should up your chances of slowing him down.
The only problem is that they were talking about it on the broadcast last night. Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen are the number 1 and 2 rated quarterbacks within a yard of the boundary. When they're pressed on the sideline, they're elite.
Yeah.
That's where those guys operate. And I lean on quarterbacks. The AFC is superior. The Ravens should win the Super Bowl. I have no doubt they're the better team. That doesn't mean they're going to win the game.
Right.
And Baltimore's going to have to show up at home, and they're probably going to have to play the best game they've played in 2 or 3 seasons to beat that Kansas City team. Because that Kansas City team is bulletproof. They're tested. They're strong. They've got balls the size of watermelons, dude. Like
So don't even think about messing with me.
They don't care. You look at how many hits did Travis Kelce take last night?
A lot.
I mean, I just, and he keeps getting up. I don't know. We can go over it and over it. Like Pacheco is carrying that team right now. But man, I look at that Ravens defense, dude, and my guy Roquan, Patrick Queen. I thought Ronald Darby probably played the best game I've ever watched him play. I mean, he played exceptionally well. Kyle Hamilton, even making 2 poor decisions to go after a football. I thought he was around the football the entire time. I don't know whatever Kyle Van Noy is taking. I want some because he is playing rejuvenated, BYU, 5 years in the NFL, Kyle Van Noy.
B12.
I mean, whatever that is. But I look at the way that Ravens defense performs, and god damn, they are scary.
Yeah.
I do not want anything to do with them.
And I think the best matchup is Ravens 49ers in the Super Bowl. I mean, that to me is the best pure mano-a-mano football matchup. But I think the reality is, man, this is where, and this is my thing for Josh Allen, man, this is where the great ones kind of separate themselves. And, the song would be different if Stephon had caught that football, but he didn't. And unfortunately for Josh, now you're going to deal with that again. So that's why I'm saying, if your ownership in today's league, whether that's in Buffalo or anywhere else, you got to have your head coach and quarterback on the same page. And until that happens, you will not have success. So when John Harbaugh and Lamar are hoisting the Super Bowl trophy, you look at that team and you understand head coach and quarterback are on the same page. You got a thumper of a defense and you got some guys to throw to. It's really not that difficult when you look at it that way.
And I think the interesting thing about Patrick Mahomes is that he's shown you, I mean, if you play zone, he's going to beat you.
Yes.
If you blitz him, he's going to beat you. If you flush him, he's going to beat you. There's not one way to stop Patrick Mahomes. And I think that the way that you stop the Kansas City Chiefs is you stop Travis Kelce. You limit him, and hey, if Rice is going to beat you, or I mean, you look at the distribution. There's a reason that it is 15 carries for Isaiah Pacheco and 2 for Clyde Edwards-Helaire. I mean, there's a reason that Travis Kelce got 6, MVS and Rashee Rice got 4, and pretty much nobody else. I mean, if Rashee Rice is injured, and he came back in the game, but if he's not a hundo P, you got to lock down Travis Kelce. And that's how you beat Patrick Mahomes. Because I don't think he is, one thing I think we've all learned about Patrick Mahomes, he is an unwilling runner. Now, he's a really good scrambler of the football, but he runs only because he hopes he can throw it.
Yep.
And I think that they are as vulnerable as they have ever been, and they are still very good.
Yeah.
And I think, again, I will wind up picking Baltimore because Baltimore is a better football team. But I am amazed. I am amazed at how resilient the Kansas City Chiefs are, because I look at these matchups. I think, obviously, Baltimore with the bye week into Houston, that's an easy route.
Yeah.
Detroit has had probably the easiest route. They have not, and that's one of the things that worries you. They should be significantly better than the Rams. They were not. They should be, and the falter at the end of the year, and don't come at me, bro, and be like, well, they report it. They report it. Ah! Okay, great. Cool. That's why you lost that game. But and it's this whole thing where I feel very passionately that Detroit is a good football team that's not as good as they believe they are.
Mm-hmm.
And they do well on fast surfaces, and I am not convinced that they have been tested or that they are. I do not think they are as nearly as good as Kansas City or Baltimore, and I just do not, for the life of me, believe that they are nearly as good as the San Francisco 49ers. And that game very clearly is different, and I get it. That game's that's a massive game.
Mm-hmm.
And I think when there's that kind of pressure and microscope, a lot of things get evened out. But I look at the way that Detroit won games, and I don't know how you lost to the Dallas Cowboys. That was a horrendous loss. But if we go over their wins, the Seahawks, or their losses rather, the Seahawks, the Ravens, the Packers, the Bears, the Cowboys. How do you explain those losses? Because it makes no sense that you lose to the Green Bay Packers at home and yet you beat them in Green Bay. Like, that's the thing that worries you.
Yeah, I mean, I think that what you're seeing there is, like, there's a big difference in head coaches here. Like, Dan Campbell is a fiery guy who, is kind of a red ass about it and wants to kick your ass. And, like, that's kind of the shtick, right? That's the mentality. But sometimes that can let you down, right? Like, sometimes if you're always fiery and always that guy and always on edge, sometimes you will misstep and you will lose a game that maybe you shouldn't lose. And I'm inclined to think that that's not in the playoffs, right? I don't think that any of these dudes are rolling up to that game in San Francisco and saying, well, maybe this is the week we lose. Like, they're not rolling up like that. But yeah, I do think that your point about playing surface truly matters, because you look at those games they lost, like those are, like, that's on the road at Seattle, right? Is that correct? Or is that
no, at home?
So you lost at home to Seattle. Which ones are the ones on grass outside?
The loss to the Ravens.
Yep.
Let's see, the loss to the Bears,
Mm-hmm.
Which was a sleeper game, and then you're inside on turf to the Cowboys. But it's what I've said about the Detroit Lions all season.
Mm-hmm.
What's the big statement, quality, holy shit, the Detroit Lions are for real win that they had this year? Yeah, I don't know either. Because, and I know that Lions fans get upset when I say this, but here are their wins. Their big win was week 1 at Kansas City.
Mm-hmm.
And then it was here are their wins: Falcons at the Packers, Panthers at the Bucks, Raiders at the Chargers, and the Chargers were horrendous, and you won that game 41-38. The Bears, not good. The Saints, not good. The Broncos, not good. The Vikings, not good. And the Vikings, not good. Those are your wins this year.
Yeah.
And I look at your playoffs, and you played two teams that, frankly, were not that good. The Rams were not that good. And I'd remind you, you won that game 24-23, and you really had a terrible second half in that game. Like, you did not come out of the locker room in that game,
Mm-hmm.
right? If you think about it, you didn't come out of the locker room in that game. From the minute that Tutu Atwell scored that touchdown, you were gripping your balls. You were You were a little concerned.
Yes.
From the minute that Tutu Atwell won that game. And then if there's any other quarterback that's over 5'1" and not throwing interceptions down the middle of the field in a playoff game, you an asshole. Anyway, and you look at this game, you need that Gibbs run.
Yeah.
That's where you were like, okay, they've got this game won. And then all of a sudden you gave up a drive to Baker and Mike Evans and you went into land.
Yeah, and that's the one that was surprising. I mean, I just don't like it. It's almost a situational awareness thing, right? I mean, you got to understand you're late in the game, but I think there was like 4 and some change left on that drive.
Yeah.
They go down the field, and you're just allowing Mike Evans to do what Mike Evans wants to do, which is incredibly surprising to me. How is it not a thing where you're doubling Mike Evans? Double Mike Evans,
It's wild.
take him away, make someone else beat you.
But this is the best and the worst of Dan Campbell.
Yes.
Because Dan Campbell isn't a great football coach. Dan Campbell isn't Andy Reid or John Harbaugh. Dan Campbell is a guy that is, and you can look at Kyle Shanahan as well. Kyle Shanahan's an offensive guru, like you get it. What is Dan Campbell? Dan Campbell is Deion Sanders. What do I mean by that? He's a motivator. He's got a lot of great one-liners. He has a dip in. He lifts weights. He's a big strapping dude.
Do you believe?
He does drills with his team in minicamp, training camps. He's a leader. He's not a coach. Dan Campbell's the CEO. And he's got a bunch of, presidents of offense, president of defense. He's got a bunch of dudes under him that are football coaches.
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with this hierarchy until you get to San Francisco on Sunday. And if you lose, then you're going to say to yourself, man, now Ben Johnson's going to leave. And then what? Because that's when that's when it's going to hit. Because he's got, and this Lions defense has got to stop giving up big plays.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the thing that terrifies you against San Francisco, because we saw it again, not to be redundant. I'm not trying to be an asshole about it, but what did we watch on this Detroit team? Big play after big play. Mike Evans.
You know what's interesting about that, though? With San Francisco stuff is not typically shots like that where, like Mike Evans style down
Oh, but
the field.
it's way worse. It's way worse. Because it's a screen pass or a toss sweep to CMC, and they're just hat on hat, and you're not good enough. The Detroit Lions are not disciplined enough, to your point.
Yeah.
They're not disciplined enough to make a tackle one-on-one.
And that's what I was going to say. Their hope in that type of situation where it's CMC with 3 wide receivers and a lineman in front of them running down the field, the only hope is that Dan Campbell has found a way to make his guys want it more. And I only say that because, again, when you're playing on that crappy-ass grass in San Francisco, and it is crappy, and you've got a guy the talent of CMC and the want to, you think CMC doesn't see what's in front of him right now? This is someone who was basically hurt for most of every season he's played, with a couple of exceptions. Now he's stayed healthy, and what do we have? Hey, you're on a Super Bowl caliber team now. So CMC is going to be out for you. So my point is, that they're going to run that stuff. I would expect you to be very physical up front. I would expect the Lions to attempt anyway to bully the 49ers, which I don't think will work. But if I'm the Lions, that's what I'm trying to do defensively.
Absolutely. I don't know. We can sit here and we're going to go over it, but you guys don't want to hear what we have to say. Why don't we hear what you have to say on the Monty Show? The comment section every day, you guys every day, are presented by our good friends at buckedup.com, the official energy drink of the Monty Show. Here it is, friends, and I'll tell you, I found a new old use for some buckshot. Had a terrible headache yesterday after a pretty average. I got to tell you about this range session real quick. I show up at the driving range yesterday. It's cold. It's a little drizzle out. I'm in a pissy ass mood. You know, just the general Sunday morning, cloudy, gloomy.
Yeah.
And then a dad and his maybe 5-year-old, 6-year-old son walk in. And this kid is just fired up to hit golf balls. And his first swing, he shoots one off and hits it off of there's a metal fence between me and this kid.
Yeah, the little barrier. Yeah.
And he hits it off the barrier. And he laughs, and his dad's like, hey, hey, hey. Like, and I'm like, no, I turned around and just kind of went like that to his dad. And they turned on the TrackMan because at this range I go to, they have TrackMan on every bay. And the kid starts hitting driver 35 yards. And he's just excited as ever. He hits one and it breaks through, and there's a puddle there that's frozen. He hits and the ball goes into the puddle, and he's fired up. And it's just, that's what it's about, friends.
Yes.
Got home, had a headache, took a buckshot, and my headache went away for like 3 hours until I woke up, and then I was watching football, and then I went to bed with a migraine, but that doesn't really count. I tell you, buckshot is a great headache cure. If you're somebody that's got to go home and deal with the kids or the wife, and all she wants to do is complain about how much somebody was farting at yoga today and ruined her yoga session, pop a buckshot on the way home. It's got 200 milligrams of naturally sourced caffeine through green tea leaf extract and a bunch of brain food, elite ingredients to make an elite product that does exactly what it says it's going to do. While I drink mine, get in the description below after our merch, because there's a link to all of our new merch.
You guys are never doing merch, man.
We did merch, but after our merch, go down. You're going to see there's a link to get 6 free buckshots right now. Cheers to you, friends. Yes, the watermelon bucked up buckshot from Bucked Up.